Last week, serial killer Bruce McArthur pleaded guilty to murdering 8 men. He was handed a life sentence for those murders this week with no chance of parole for 25 years. That means the 67-year-old will not be eligible to apply for parole before he is 91. Now, following Bruce McArthur's sentencing, a vigil will be held tomorrow at the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto to remember his victims. And joining me now to talk about the vigil, Reverend Jeff Rock. He is the senior pastor at that church. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, Reverend, what are your thoughts about the plea and, most importantly, the sentence? Because we all know that a lot of people were disappointed by that.
You know, on one hand, there's a feeling of relief that we aren't going to have to endure this story for months to come with a lengthy trial. And in many ways, we've been spared some of the gruesome details of this case. So I'm relieved that it was a guilty plea and that we can spare the families and the testimony. But this week, one of my colleagues did a community victim impact statement to remind us of how much this is really affecting people. And even though it's not been a full trial, there's a real feeling of being triggered, I think, in the community. You know, that these crimes were uncovered a year ago, and we had a vigil then, and we felt we needed to have another vigil now. You know, some people are upset and angry that the perpetrator wasn't given a longer sentence. I know that in the reading, the judge gave a long list of reasonings and Canadian case law. It feels a bit of cold comfort. I know a lot of people had been hoping for a much more serious sentence, and it's not lost on me that there was another sentencing hearing yesterday in Quebec City for a mosque shooting there, and a similar case where the perpetrator was given a 40-year sentence and people had hoped for a long time. You know, my belief is our justice system is certainly flawed, but it's the best one we have. So what this vigil is about is bringing people together, whether they're in grief, whether they're angry, and creating a really safe space for us to come together as a community and really start the healing process.
And what really would it accomplish by sentencing him to 150 years? I think we can be fairly certain that Bruce McArthur will never get out of jail.
You know, my understanding is he can only apply for parole for the first time at the age of 91.
Yes.
So realistically, what experts have been saying is that he will never leave his jail cell, and he's even admitted that he doesn't deserve to ever leave his jail cell. You know, that's still cold comfort to a community that's in grief. I think you know, we as Canadians sometimes get a bit smug and think we have LGBTQ inclusion in this country, and that, you know, in the city of Toronto, it's the most racially diverse city in the world. But this was a specifically racially targeted crime that disproportionately affected South Asian and Middle Eastern men. So this is really a reminder that we have a lot of work to do on LGBTQ inclusion in racialized communities and racial inclusion in the LGBTQ community and in the wider city of Toronto. We have a lot of coming together across the lines of difference.
It was almost exactly a year ago that you held a vigil for the victims. Why was it important to hold another one now?
So we held a vigil a year ago when there was 5 named victims, and we lit 5 candles for those victims, and then a 6th candle in the event that others might be uncovered, and indeed 2 more bodies were recovered. I feel personally that only now that the trial is done that can we start the healing process. I'm really discovering in our community and in our city that people are really feeling just the grief process isn't a clean process. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. You know,
no time that it's going to end.
Exactly. But what we can do is commit to coming together across the lines of difference and healing. So tomorrow's vigil will have people from the Muslim community, the Hindu community, and the Indigenous community, as well as our Christian community, together working to make sure something like this never happens again, that we can openly talk about our sexuality and make sure that we're safe. You know, one of my commitments is that the #1 way people, whether straight or gay, meet in this day and age is online. That's couples getting married. And we know that this perpetrator used online mediums to connect with his victims. And we should be able to talk more openly about our sexuality so we can live in a safe world. And my fear is that this will make us more shame and stigma-based, and it's important for us to continue to have these conversations and work together and be open and inclusive and loving.
We will look forward to the vigil, and we will certainly be there, as I'm sure most other media will be, so we'll have full coverage of that for our viewers tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.